I'm not your date, the young woman said, her voice quiet but firm, a ripple of sound in the hushed cathedral of the restaurant. Her name was Amara, and she felt the weight of 100 pairs of eyes on her, all of them assessing the simple elegance of her purple dress, the generous curve of her body, and the deep, rich tone of her skin. She was an island of vibrant life in a sea of muted, expensive grays and blacks. In her hands, she held a bouquet of white camellias, their petals like carved alabaster, a stark splash of purity against the deep violet of her attire. The man seated before her did not move. His name was Kaido, and stillness was his native language. He sat with the posture of a man who had never in his life been required to slouch, his suit a shadow of perfect tailoring, his hands resting on the white linen of the table. A whisper of a rumor followed him everywhere he went, a rumor that spoke of shipping manifests, harbor unions, and the silent, swift justice of the Tokyo night transplanted to this city's shores.
He was not a man you said no to.
Amara had only come to deliver the flowers, a special late-night order for the restaurant's most exclusive private table. But the table was set for two, and the other chair was empty. What she did not know, as she stood there feeling profoundly out of place, was that two men in a dark sedan across the street were watching the restaurant's entrance through binoculars, waiting for Kaido to be joined by a woman they had been paid to identify. Her arrival had just changed everything. If you are new here, welcome. We tell stories about the moments that change a life forever. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss a story. Now, let us get back to it. Amara repeated herself, the words feeling fragile in the opulent air. Sir, I'm just from the flower shop. I was told to deliver these to this table. She gestured with the bouquet. The scent of the camellias a clean, green fragrance in the rich atmosphere of roasted duck and old wine. Kaido's eyes, dark and unreadable, finally lifted from the flowers to her face. He did not seem surprised or annoyed. He seemed only to be observing, taking in the slight tremble in her hand, the unwavering honesty in her gaze. My guest has been unavoidably detained, he said, his voice a low baritone, smooth and without accent. Permanently, it would seem, there was no emotion in the statement, just a declaration of fact. He looked at the empty chair, then back at her. It would be a shame to let this reservation go to waste.
Please. Seat.
Stay until dessert. Amara's heart did a frantic little dance against her ribs.
Seat.
With him? She thought of her grandmother, likely already asleep in her armchair with the television murmuring. She thought of the long bus ride home. I can't, she said, more to herself than to him. I have to get back. He saw the hesitation, the conflict warring in her expression. He was a man who understood leverage, but this time he chose a different tool. I will compensate you for your time, of course, he offered, his tone making it sound like a simple business transaction. Double your delivery fee. Triple it. It was not the money that swayed her, though it would have helped with the rising cost of her grandmother's medicine. It was the strange, quiet insistence in his eyes, a flicker of something she could not name. It was not a command, but a genuine request. Just until dessert, she found herself agreeing, her own voice a surprise to her. She placed the bouquet in the silver vase, waiting in the center of the table, and as the maitre d' materialized from the shadows to pull out her chair, she felt as if she had just stepped off a cliff into a deep, unknown water. The silence that fell between them after she sat was heavier than any conversation. The clinking of distant silverware and the low hum of murmured talk from other tables seemed to amplify the void at their own. Amara, a 20-year-old whose life revolved around soil, stems, and the simple accounts of a small family business, had nothing in common with a man who commanded a silent empire. She smoothed the fabric of her dress over her lap, her hands feeling large and clumsy. Kaido did not seem uncomfortable. He simply watched the room, his gaze sweeping over it with a practiced, assessing calm. Finally, he looked back at the flowers now sitting between them. The white camellias, he said, breaking the quiet. Why did you choose them? The question was unexpected. Most clients just specified a color or a price. Amara's shoulders relaxed a fraction. This was a world she understood. The order just said, white flowers for an occasion of respect, in our shop, for respect. We often suggest camellias. They're balanced. They have a quiet dignity. She paused, then decided to add the part she always loved. In Hanakatoba, the Japanese language of flowers, they can mean perfected loveliness or a kind of deep, unassuming gratitude. I thought it fit, a flicker of something, surprise, perhaps even appreciation, crossed Kaido's face. It was there, and gone in a second, a brief parting of the clouds. "You run the shop yourself?" he asked. "My grandmother and I," Amara replied, a warmth entering her voice. "It was my grandfather's before that. He started it when he came to this city. It's called Perennial Promise." He nodded slowly, as if committing the name to memory. "Amara," she offered, feeling the need to fill the space. "My name is Amara." He gave her a slight, formal bow of his head. Kaido, the waiter, arrived then, a silent professional who took their orders without a word, and for a moment, it almost felt normal. Almost. Outside, in the polished black car parked in the shadows of an old brownstone, a man named Ivanov lowered his binoculars. He was not Japanese. He was Russian, a predator of a different climate, and he was here to poach territory. His business was narcotics, and Kaido's control of the port was a thorn in his side. "Who is the girl?" he grunted in his native tongue to the driver. The driver, a low-level thug with a nervous twitch, shrugged. "I don't know. Not the one from the photo. This one is different." Ivanov raised the binoculars again, focusing on the restaurant window. He could just make out Amara's profile, the rich purple of her dress a beacon in the dim light. The woman they had been expecting was a political attaché, a woman whose public association with Kaido would have been a scandal, a useful piece of leverage. This girl was a nobody. Or was she? He met her outside, the driver offered. She gave him flowers. Then he took her in. Ivanov processed this. Kaido was a creature of immense caution. He did not make spontaneous moves. He did not invite unknowns into his circle, especially not on a night he knew he was being watched. "She is a message," Ivanov decided, his voice cold with certainty. "Or she is a shield. Find out who she is." Inside the restaurant, a subtle vibration came from Kaido's pocket. He discreetly checked his phone under the table. It was a single character, a symbol from one of his lookouts. It meant observed. He did not react, his face remaining a mask of polite composure. But as he placed the phone back in his pocket, his gaze fell on Amara, who was tentatively tasting her soup. And for the first time that night, he felt a sliver of something he rarely allowed himself: concern. He had intended this evening as a quiet, solitary gesture of respect. He had just turned it into a battlefield and placed an innocent woman in the middle of it. The first course was cleared away, replaced by the main. Amara was beginning to feel a strange sense of unreality, as if she were an actress in a play she had not rehearsed. The tension had eased into a quiet rhythm, with Kaido asking her more questions about her work, about the types of flowers she loved most, about the challenges of keeping a small business alive. He listened with an unnerving focus, his gaze never wavering. It was during this fragile piece that a new figure approached their table. He was an American, loud and fleshy in an expensive suit that fit him poorly. He oozed a false, predatory confidence. "Kaido," the man boomed, ignoring Amara completely at first. "Fancy seeing you here. I thought you preferred more traditional company." His eyes slid over to Amara, a dismissive, insolent smirk spreading across his face. "Branching out." The insult was clear, wrapped in layers of condescension about her race, her size, her presence at this table. It was a power play, an attempt to provoke Kaido by disrespecting his guest. Amara felt a hot flush of shame and anger rise in her chest. She had been the target of such casual cruelty before, but here, in this place, it felt magnified, designed to inflict maximum humiliation. She expected Kaido to react, to unleash the cold fury she sensed simmering beneath his calm exterior. But he did nothing. He simply watched, his expression unreadable, leaving the space open for her. The man, emboldened by the silence, leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Look, whatever you're paying, I'll double it. A man like him deserves better arm candy." Amara set her fork down gently. She did not raise her voice. She did not cry. She looked directly into the man's smug eyes and held his gaze. "I'm not for sale," she said, her voice low and steady. "And my presence here is clearly of more value than your opinion. You should return to your table." The man's face purpled with rage. To be dismissed so calmly, so completely, by her, was a blow to his fragile ego he could not absorb. He was accustomed to people who flinched. Amara did not flinch. "You little," he began, his hand shooting out, intending to grab her arm, to assert the physical dominance he felt was his right. But his fingers never made it. In a movement so fast it was almost a blur, Kaido's hand shot across the table and clamped around the man's wrist. There was no sound, no struggle. Just the sudden, shocking connection. The man's eyes widened, his bravado vanishing in a wave of pure, undiluted fear. He looked down at Kaido's hand, at the knuckles white with pressure, and he understood that he had crossed a line he did not even know existed. The pressure on his wrist was immense, a vice of bone and sinew. Kaido did not look at him. He continued to look at Amara, as if ensuring she was all right. Then, slowly, he turned his head, and his eyes, cold as a winter sea, met the man's. "You have made 2 mistakes," Kaido said, his voice barely a whisper, yet it cut through the silence like a razor. "Your first was interrupting my meal. Your second was attempting to touch my guest." He tightened his grip, and a small, choked gasp escaped the man's lips. "You will apologize to the lady. Then you will leave this restaurant. And you will not return." The man, trembling, could barely stammer the words. I'm sorry." Kaido held his grip for a second longer, a silent reinforcement of the lesson. Then he released him. The man stumbled back, clutching his wrist, his face pale with sweat. He practically ran from the room, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. The entire restaurant had watched the exchange. Kaido had drawn a line in the sand, and he had placed Amara safely behind it. The waiter, a master of his craft, appeared as if from thin air to clear the main course plates, his movements smooth and economical, betraying nothing of the drama that had just unfolded. Soon, 2 plates of dessert were placed before them. A delicate green tea tiramisu for Kaido, and a rich chocolate lava cake for Amara. The air was thick with the aftermath of the confrontation. The quiet intimacy they had started to build had been shattered, replaced by a stark awareness of the man Kaido truly was. He was not just a quiet businessman. He was power. He was danger. Amara looked at him, at the calm that had once again settled over his features, and saw him differently. The fear was still there, a low hum beneath the surface, but it was now mixed with a strange and profound sense of safety. He had protected her. He had not hesitated. He finally met her gaze, and for the first time, his composure seemed to have a hairline crack in it. A hint of something vulnerable, something almost regretful, showed in his eyes. "I apologize, Amara," he said, his voice low. "I should not have exposed you to that." To him, she shook her head slightly. "You didn't. He did that all by himself." She picked up her spoon and took a small bite of the warm, decadent cake. "Thank you," she said softly, the words feeling inadequate for what had happened. He simply nodded. A man like that understands only one language. It is regrettable that it must be spoken so plainly. He looked at the white camellias in the vase between them. "You said they signify gratitude," he mused, a faint, sad smile touching his lips. "It seems I am the one who is grateful tonight. You carry yourself with a strength that many men who call themselves strong could never comprehend." In that moment, the Mafia boss, the whispered rumors, all of it fell away. She saw only a man, burdened by his world, recognizing a quiet fortitude in hers. When the meal was over, Kaido insisted on driving her home. The thought of her taking the night bus now seemed absurd, dangerous. "It is not a request," he had said simply, leaving no room for argument. His car was not a flashy sports car, but a large, dark, unassuming sedan that felt as solid as a bank vault when the door closed. The windows were thick, the interior silent and insulated from the sounds of the city. His driver was a compact, stern-faced Japanese man who did not speak. As they pulled away from the restaurant, Kaido turned to her in the quiet of the back seat. "The man at the restaurant, Mr. Albright, he is an associate of a rival. A man named Ivanov. They believed you were someone else, a political contact. When they saw you, they assumed you were a vulnerability." Amara's blood ran cold. This was not just a random act of bullying. It was part of something bigger, a dark game she had unknowingly walked into. The car moved smoothly through the city streets, a cocoon of safety. Then Kaido spoke again, his voice taking on a different tone, one of history and confession. "Here's the part of the story you do not know, Amara. The reason I was at that restaurant tonight, the reason I ordered flowers from your specific shop." He paused, gathering the words. 50 years ago, your grandfather, a man named Samuel, worked on the docks. My father had just arrived in this country. He did not speak the language well. He was trying to organize workers for fair pay, and he ran afoul of a corrupt union boss. One night, on the pier, they tried to kill him. 3 men. Your grandfather was the only one who intervened. He was a big, strong man. He placed himself between my father and a knife, and he took a wound that left a scar he carried for the rest of his life. He saved my father's life. Amara stared at him, speechless. Her grandfather had that scar, a jagged white line on his forearm. He'd always said it was from a piece of falling machinery. My father never forgot, Kaido continued. He built his organization on the principle of repaying debts. He passed that principle to me. He died last month. I came here to settle his accounts. Your grandfather is gone, your father too. You and your grandmother are all that is left of his line. The flowers, the dinner was meant to be a quiet tribute, a way to honor a debt owed to your family. The empty chair was for him, for Samuel. The revelation hung in the silent car, rearranging the entire evening, the entire world. Kaido's interest in her, his protection, the flowers themselves, it was not a whim. It was an obligation. A 50-year-old promise being kept. He had not been looking for a date. He had been seeking to pay homage to the memory of the man who saved his father. Amara thought of her grandfather, a man she remembered as gentle and quiet, with strong hands that smelled of soil and pipe tobacco. She had never known the story of his bravery. He never told us, she whispered.
He would not have, Kaido said.
It was not his way. The car slowed as they turned onto her street, a modest block of brick apartment buildings. The streetlights cast long, lonely shadows. As the driver pulled to the curb in front of her building, another car, the same black sedan from the restaurant, screeched around the corner, its headlights cutting through the darkness, pinning them. It blocked their path. 2 doors flew open and 2 men spilled out, their shapes dark and menacing. Amara's breath caught in her throat. It was Ivanov's men. They were not giving up. Before she could even process the fear, Kaido's hand was on her shoulder, firm and steady. Stay in the car. Do not look, he commanded, his voice devoid of all warmth, now pure, cold steel. Simultaneously, another car, one she hadn't even noticed, a dark SUV that had been trailing them silently all along, accelerated from behind. 2 of Kaido's own men, including the stern-faced driver from earlier, emerged from it, moving with a chilling, practiced efficiency. The confrontation was brutally swift. There were no shouts, no gunshots. Just the sickening, dull thuds of violence, swift and decisive, happening in the shadows just beyond the beam of the headlights. Kaido shielded her body with his own, turning her away from the window, his presence a wall between her and the brutal reality of his world. Within 30 seconds, it was over. Kaido's men were standing. Ivanov's were not. Kaido escorted her from the car to the front door of her building, his men melting back into the shadows as quickly as they had appeared. The street was quiet again, as if nothing had happened, but the air was still charged with violence. At the door to her small apartment, he stopped. He looked down at her, his face etched with a deep, weary regret. He will not bother you again, Kaido said. It was not a guess. It was a statement of fact. This debt to your family, it is more than just memory. It is protection. As long as I am able, your family will be safe. You will not have to worry about men like Albright or Ivanov or the cost of medicine. Ever again, he was formally repaying the debt, not with money, but with security, a shield forged from the very power that had endangered her. Amara looked up at this complicated, dangerous, and honorable man, and for the first time, she was not afraid of him. She understood. She understood the weight he carried, the code he lived by. She reached out and placed her hand on his arm, her touch a small anchor in the storm of his life. "My grandfather would have been proud," she said softly. "Not of the violence, but of the kept promise." He looked at her hand on his sleeve, then back to her face. A long, silent moment passed between them, a final acknowledgement of the strange, profound bond that had been forged in a single evening. He gave a slight, formal nod, the barest hint of a bow. "Good night, Amara." Then he turned and walked back into the night, leaving her safe at her door, the debt finally paid. The final image she had was of him disappearing into the darkness, a solitary figure who commanded shadows but seemed to live without any light of his own. Weeks passed. The memory of that night began to feel like a strange, vivid dream. But its effects were real. A large, anonymous order for weekly floral arrangements for a downtown corporate office came through, enough to single-handedly ensure her shop's future. The rent on their small apartment was suddenly paid a year in advance by an unknown benefactor. Her grandmother's prescriptions were covered by a new, comprehensive insurance plan that appeared out of nowhere. Amara knew where it all came from. It was the silent, steady fulfillment of Kaido's promise. The shield he had placed around her family was invisible but absolute. She did not see him again, and a part of her wondered if she ever would. The chapter felt closed, the debt settled. Then one Tuesday evening, as she was preparing to close the shop, the little bell over the door chimed.
Kaido stood there.
He was not wearing his immaculate suit, but a simple dark sweater and trousers. He looked younger, less formidable. In his hand, he held a single, perfect white camellia. He was not flanked by bodyguards or drivers. He was alone. He walked over to the counter and placed the flower gently upon it, a mirror of the gesture she had made at the restaurant. "I was in the neighborhood," he said, the words a polite fiction. They both knew he was there for a reason. Amara smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached her eyes. "It's a beautiful flower," she said. He looked around the small, fragrant shop, at the buckets of roses and lilies, the bundles of eucalyptus, the vibrant chaos of life she curated. "You are closing up," he observed. "Yes," she replied, her heart beating a little faster. A different kind of quiet settled between them now, not of tension or awkwardness, but of possibility. He looked at her, his dark eyes holding a question he seemed hesitant to ask. Finally he spoke, his voice soft. "May I help?" The offer hung in the air, simple, profound. It was not a date. It was not a transaction. It was an offer to share a simple, ordinary task. It was a beginning. What do you think is more powerful, a grand gesture or a quiet, consistent act of loyalty? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next story.